Hey everyone, welcome back to your favorite revenue podcast. I'm your host, Ross Rich, and today we have another special episode. We have CRO at Ignitium, Eric Agnew, joining us today. Appreciate you taking some time.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, before we dig into all things execution excellence and how to make that happen, would love to get to know you a bit for the audience here and hear how you made your way into revenue leadership. So, what was your path to getting to this role?
I feel like I've had a very unique path. Sales has been something that I've done late in my career. I really came up more through customer success. So even my earliest jobs, like my very first job was paperboy. And then I worked at a grocery store in high school. I worked as a bank teller in college. I worked at a nonprofit. And once I started getting into my real like big boy jobs, I really came up through customer service. So I spent 6 years in my early 20s doing technical support. So I was on the phones with customers doing hardware, software support. And then I started doing implementation and training, troubleshooting out in the field. And then I went to Gonzaga University, go Zags, got my MBA, and then I moved more into the business side of the company I was working at. So I managed a department called Service Business. We had 3,000 plus service contracts. So it was really more of the renewals business,
Mm.
which was great. It was very high margin business, about 65% margin. And when I started, it was about $50 million annual revenue, was able to grow to about 135 million. So I really
Amazing.
never considered that sales. Again, it was a bit more service oriented with our customers. And then fast forward, when I moved into a new career, I'd always had a passion for marketing. I dabbled in it in my side hustles and little things I was doing outside of my main job. And I really wanted a career in that. I had been dabbling so much that I had been teaching it at Gonzaga to the MBA students as the first digital marketing courses that they ever had. So I
Cool.
was teaching social media for business and content marketing, but I really was self-taught. I was more of a self-educated individual, and I hadn't done that in a professional setting. So when I had the opportunity to start a new career, I relaunched into this career at Ignitium, where we do account-based marketing with enterprise clients. So I spent the next couple of years as a practitioner, and
Mm.
I just dove in and I learned and I practiced, and I just worked side by side with clients to develop their strategies, to execute their programs, and to really get good at it. But I had never done sales, and it's true story. My first week on the job, our founder and CEO Oleg, who's amazing, he's my mentor. He's taught me so much. First week on the job, I can barely spell ABM, and we had a lead come in from the website, and he said, "Hey, why don't you follow up on this lead?" And I was like, "What's a lead?" I don't like literally I'd never done sales,
Wow.
and I was that green. And he's like, "Oh, somebody filled out a demo request. You just need to tell them what we do." And I was like, "Awesome. What do we do?" Like, and so I really just dove in, and I feel like most sellers know that part of selling is just being brave. And so I just learned to jump in, and I discovered that selling was really learning the pain points of an individual and helping to answer their questions and moving them past all of their objections and concerns until they got to yes. And so now, fast forward 7 years later, that's the primary function of my job. And I really love being able to work with great enterprise clients and help them grow their business.
I love that. And honestly, the perfect transition to some of the pieces you have around how you think about now leading this team as chief revenue officer to drive execution excellence. The first one being if the client is successful, we'll be successful. And
Yeah.
honestly, some of these things are so much more simple than we make it out to be. We have all these crazy acronyms and frameworks and things. And I think they're all just a way to kind of focus on what you just said. Like it's a straight
Yeah.
line, kind of the classic Jordan Belfort. Like the people have concerns. You need to understand what it's like to do the
Yeah.
job today, what the
Yeah.
challenges are, and how you help solve that. I think we really overcomplicate things. So, why
Yeah.
is number one for you? If the client is successful, we'll be successful.
with our business, we really don't even have a dedicated sales team. I probably spend 50% of my time selling. Our CEO, Oleg, does a little bit, but obviously he's got the whole company to run. So he spends like a little portion of his time doing that. I have another team member, and she gets to spend a portion of her time doing that. But the majority of our effort is supporting clients. And I think there's well-known statistics that it's 5 to 10 times more expensive to acquire a new customer
Yeah.
than it is to retain an existing one. In our particular business, we probably invest 2 to 3 times the amount of scoped hours that we're expecting in the first quarter.
Mm.
So the first year is sort of a loss leader. We really are profitable if we have a contract that's going to be multiple years long. So that first quarter and really the first 12 months, we're going really, really deep with the clients. You have to understand their systems inside and out. You have to understand their workflows. And our job is to help them drive pipeline. And that obviously takes a long time, especially when we're helping our clients with enterprise sales and marketing programs. So for us to show success, we have to help them grow their pipeline, start to close their deals. And if they've got a deal cycle that's 6 to 12 months, it takes a year to really prove out that these tactics work. So since we're investing so heavily, we want that client to be super happy.
Yeah.
We want them to be with us for 5, 6, 7 years or more. And we do have some of those great clients, and it's been amazing relationships. So really like an extension of their team. If we churn one of those clients, then we have to start that whole process over. It's super time consuming. It's a really heavy load on the team, plus all of the other sales process. It's 3 to 6 months to work an enterprise client through the whole deal cycle. And so if we do a really good job of keeping churn low, they're happy, they grow their business with us. And so that's really in the earliest years of Ignitium, how we've seen ourselves grow is incrementally by providing a ton of value to our clients and then expanding through them. And that way we don't have to heavily focus so much on new logo. Now we are starting to ramp up on that more. We've
Mm-hmm.
expanded the team quite a bit. We've grown our capacity. We've gotten better with our product and our processes. So we will focus more on new logo, but I think at its core, the majority of what the team does, 90%, is really focused on customer satisfaction.
Yeah, I loved your quote that you had written down around this, which was offense gets on the highlight reel and defense
Yeah,
wins championships.
yeah,
When I try to think about, just how obvious it is that growing with your customer base is so much more efficient, but it's not sexy. It doesn't
yeah,
get, it unfortunately isn't it doesn't get the attention it deserves. So I think when sales leaders or revenue leaders come from that post sales or onboarding side, sometimes I think it helps balance out that like emotional
yeah,
excitement about winning a new customer.
yeah,
Renewing a great customer, you just don't, it doesn't feel the same. It's not as visceral, but
yeah,
again, it's way more efficient to go to your 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, because
yeah,
you're not paying that upfront toll. We just don't think about the compounding effects of like hiring the new reps and building the top of funnel and how many conversations that takes to the
yeah.
evaluation and signing them. So I think it's a great reminder for folks out there.
Yeah, exactly. I get the pleasure of I do have a gong on my desk, or every good sales leader should have a bell or a gong or a money gun they get to shoot off like something. And so that is super fun. But when I do that, it kicks off several hundred hours worth of work for the team, and that's like really the grind and the effort. And they love it. They all enjoy their jobs, but they would also love it if they got to get everybody to a steady state where programs are humming along, pipeline is generating for our clients, and they don't have to repeat the months of effort to spin up a new program and really get it up to speed.
Totally, totally. Well, shifting gears to the second point you had around your kind of top strategies for execution excellence is around authenticity.
Mm,
This is something that I find so hard to quantify, measure, to really prove out in an interview cycle when we're building a team on the
Yeah.
revenue side, but is such a differentiator because people at the end of the
Hmm.
day have their day job that might be buying or working with a vendor like ourselves.
Yeah.
And just the openness to spend time with someone, to share information, to do all those things is really human.
Yeah.
And having someone that people feel comfortable with or excited to work with comes from, I think, that authentic, connection, passion for what you're working on, and that human connection. So curious, why that's number two on your list and
Yeah.
how you think about identifying that and building that into, your team because it is such like an amorphous thing, right?
Yeah. I think that people have a innate radar for BS. And when you're interacting with people, like you said, it is somewhat hard to quantify, but there's like a spidey sense that goes off in the back of your mind if you're talking with someone and you're like, they just don't seem genuine, or they're trying too hard, or they just know that there's something off there.
Yeah.
And what I have found with my personal approach is I just think of myself like a consultant. Somebody has a problem, they're seeking an answer to the problem. It's my job to help them. And if I'm going to try to establish a relationship that we want to last 5+ years, they have to see the same me every time they talk to me. There has to be a
Mm-hmm.
consistency, and it's in all things, people generally thrive with consistency. Anybody who's like parented children knows that your children thrive when there's consistency. If you've managed a team, your team thrives when there's consistency. And I think the client relationship is very much the same. And the market that we serve, I always somewhat assume that enterprise B2B tech and SaaS marketers would be this gigantic universe. It's actually like a fairly tight community.
Tiny. Yeah.
It's way smaller than I ever thought. And a good portion of our best leads and demo requests comes from referrals.
Yeah.
So if I've done a good job and our team has done a good job taking care of a client, then they're going to interact with people and conferences and trade shows and workshops and share. And I've had like several of those conversations this week where even though I didn't know initially,
That it came from,
at some
yes.
point in the conversation they said, "Well, I actually talked to so and so," and it's like they've not asked for a referral from me. They've like known who we worked with, and they've already vetted us through their network. And so if you are not authentic in who you are, then it's really going to come out, and you're really not going to be your best self either. Like I kind of like know who I am.
It's
I'm
also not as
40.
fun, kind of what you're saying, right? It's like if you could be yourself, I'm going to tell you, not only will you see amazing results, you will actually just have a more, like, a better experience 8 hours of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I kind of know myself. I'm 47 years old. I've got more gray than I used to. I kind of give off dad vibes. I have 3 kids. And so my personality amongst the office, with my family, with my friends, is very much the same that I use when I'm interacting with people. Now, maybe you turn it up 5% just to make sure you're bringing good energy, or I'm just like very well caffeinated on most times anyways. But it's like my strengths are I'm smart, I'm friendly, and I'm somewhat funny some of the time. And I just bring myself authentically. And if I'm goofy at some point, it comes off as just like authentically who I am. And, people connect with me in that way. And I think some people have different personalities. Others might be more technical.
Mm-hmm.
Others, might have a completely different skill set. But knowing what tools you got to work with and using them the best you can, I think it generally just comes off the best with people you're working with.
I completely agree. And that's kind of where, not to go too far on a tangent, I think a lot of people, when they move to sales leadership, think my team needs to do what I'm doing, but everyone's
Hmm.
authentic
Yeah.
thing makes them approach deals and connect with people differently. And so how do you still do the right things? There's core things you need to do in sales and CS to, effectively work with customers, but then how do you make sure that you're coaching towards
Yeah,
people that have, their authentic self is different than yours and they'll connect with people
yeah,
differently. I think that's one of the biggest challenges of running a
yeah,
team.
yeah. I think ultimately you're building trust, and people are making significant investments, and they're also putting their own reputation and maybe their own jobs on the line when they make these really big purchase decisions.
Yeah.
If I'm working with a CMO, they might be new in their organization and they know they have 12 to 18 months to perform. And if they don't, they're going to be looking for a new opportunity.
Yeah.
And so they're going to be investing in the technology, the data partners, the other, agency partners, et cetera, platforms that they're going to buy. And they're all significant investments. So they're trying to be a good steward of their company's
Yeah.
resources, but also it's like their own reputation and their own job is potentially on the line. So you have to establish trust and show them that you're not going to leave them high and dry, that you're really going to be their strategic partner that they can rely on, and that inevitably things always can have the opportunity to go wrong. There's going to be, and when you're engaging deeply in really hard work, stuff doesn't always go 100% the way you envisioned it. And you have to have difficult conversations. You have to work through issues. And if they know that they can trust you, then they're not going to throw their hands up and give up. They're going to work through it together until you get to a solution. So at the end of the day, you just really have to establish that trust, and you got to be authentic to do it.
Totally. And I feel like this last piece is kind of full circle to the whole conversation here around making customers successful and being yourself. Kind of already brought this up a bit, but that your buyers likely already know about you well before
Yeah.
any sense of engagement starts to happen. I mean, I think this is, a tale as old as time, even, probably before the internet, of just kind of word of mouth probably being one of the biggest drivers to any
Mhm.
business, whether it's B2B or B2C. But I think is especially true now, with just how much information there is out there, and people don't want to be in the funnel yet a lot of the time,
Mhm.
especially with the bar for making these decisions going higher up. Like you said, people can, lose a job or get a promotion based on some of these relationships that they're building.
Yeah.
They want to be really careful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going to have a unique perspective on this given the kind of ABM focus. So, how do you
Mhm.
think about that? How do you think about, setting yourself up to be in the conversation, without you in the room? How do you think about understanding kind of like knowing that maybe sooner so you can influence deals? Yeah,
Mhm.
curious to kind of pull apart the veil here.
Yeah, I think this has been a challenge for a long time, like you said, but it's only getting more challenging. There's been studies for years from Gartner and Forrester and other analysts about how much of the buying journey is being done before somebody raises their hands to talk to sales. And for years, it's been 70%, 75%. And now newer studies, Sixth Sense, they did a bunch of analysis with all of their customers recently over the last 2 years, and now they're saying it's 80 plus percent. And so the deals are getting more complex. The buying committees are getting larger. The deal sizes are getting bigger. There's increasing scrutiny from IT security and from procurement. And so, as all of these deals get bigger and more complex, the people who are leading the efforts are having to do a lot of due diligence,
Yeah.
and they're doing it much, much sooner than you know that they're doing it. So, with our clients, what we do when we're doing sales enablement and establishing all of their marketing programs is we teach them and run programs to them where we're front loading a lot of the work.
Hmm.
We have to proactively map out the buyers who are showing the right signals. A lot of the signals in the market are somewhat anonymous. You like know that it's coming from ABC company, but you don't know who at ABC
Yeah.
company. So a lot of the effort that we do is to de-anonymize items. So who is spending time on your website? Not what company, but what person. what person is spending time engaging with your advertisements? Not the company, but the person. Who's researching topics across the web that are relevant to what you sell? Not the company, but the person. So I think the challenge before us that we can solve is de-anonymizing all of this and then giving them a frictionless buying experience. Because old style marketing was full of gates. You're just like stopping their process along the way. Oh, you
Yeah.
want to read that ebook? Fill out this form.
Creating
And
friction because you might have a slightly upper hand and they might
yep,
want to get information from you that they couldn't elsewhere.
exactly. Exactly. But now the information is so prevalent, and all of your competitors are probably ungating all of their content and their information. And so if you're not, you're falling behind because you're making it hard for the buyers. So you have to like find the right signals, identify the buyers very early, give them a frictionless buying experience, and then try to be the first person to engage with them. Because if you are the first person, you give yourself a huge, huge, huge first mover advantage
Yeah,
that was likely to win you the deal. You're
totally.
significantly higher win rate if you're the first one that they interact with.
Yeah, you get to influence the perspective on the market, the potential solutions, and it's simpler to go with the person you're furthest along with, right? Because you have a day job on
Yeah.
top of buying stuff. So if you feel confident in the first one, why not?
Yep.
That's a
Yep.
really good call. Well, before we wrap things up, would love to get your perspective on what you find the most challenging part of leading a revenue organization.
Ooh, that's a good question. I think this is one where anybody who's in charge of revenue org, you really feel the weight of the whole company on your shoulders. And you
Amen.
probably know that logically going into it, but until you actually experience it, it's a different feeling. It's fun to hit the gong, it's fun to celebrate wins, but when it's not going as well as you want, you might be going, ooh, gosh, if you're a small company, you're thinking about payroll, and you're like, in order for everybody to eat, somebody's got to sell. And
Yeah.
that is a hefty weight. It's a burden to bear. But if you have a great team, you invest in your team, I think knowing that you don't really have to do it alone, that even though you might be the leader who's carrying the mantle, you can really do the work through the team. And if you're investing in them,
Yeah.
the burden is far, far lighter. And, you know, people love to have ownership over items. And so I found that the more that we've invested in our team members and pour into them, train them, then there's a greater return than what I can try to do on my own. So that's one of the ways. And I just say that one of the challenges of being a revenue leader is you can just never let up. I've had times where I made the mistake of going like, oh, we're flush with customers. We couldn't possibly take on another one right now. I took the foot off the gas, and then, oh no, you experience some churn, and you're like, oh my God, now I don't have enough pipeline, and it's going to take me 3 or 4 months to get us back. And so I feel like one of the things that I think of is that quote that says, success isn't owned, it's leased,
Hmm.
and rent is due every day.
I
And so
love
you
that.
just got to be putting in time every day, building the business, and not worrying so much about the downstream. Like the team is ready to handle it and they will grow with the business. So the Reveliners just kind of got to be pushing beyond maybe what you're even comfortable with and knowing that you can always expand your capacity.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard that quote before. I love that. Success isn't owned,
Mm,
it's leased, and rent is due every day. It feels like the mantra for sales.
yeah,
Um, if you rest on your laurels, like you said, you can get in those positions, but it always feels good to slightly be ahead and to keep it up, right? You sleep well at night and you feel like you're winning and you get that energy from the team with that momentum you're building. So it's always
yeah,
easier to kind of be slightly ahead.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you taking the time with us on this Friday afternoon. Yeah, it was great to hear your perspective. I think, like you said, kind of coming from that unique background, having that super customer oriented mindset makes things easier on the front end and helpful reminder even for me to kind of think about that. So appreciate it, Eric.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Ross. I appreciate you and the team, and thanks for having me on.